session about budgets because I do get a lot of questions related to budgets. Obviously, what budget should I choose for the start? How do I scale my budgets properly? Why did Google spend more than my daily budget today? Things like that. Obviously, when it comes to money, people want to understand exactly like how does it work? How does Google spend my budget? Things like that. So we will discuss that in detail here. Go over some of the most important principles you have to understand in terms of budget. Let's choose that color for that video, because why not? Alright, first and most important principle, and we tackled that in the videos before, but when we start with a new store, a new campaign, we always start with a small budget. And that's the most important part as well. Not too little. And I think that's one of the most common beginner mistakes as well. You don't want to start with a budget of like 10 euros a day, for example, or like 20. Let's cut that so that's super clear. Why? Because if you choose a budget like that and you're too afraid of spending money, you will never win. Because with that budget, you will never get out of the learning phase. The whole thing will look like that. You start your campaign, you get a couple of clicks, and maybe here a purchase there, a couple of clicks, and it will look like that for months. Because in the end, then you look back after some time and you spend 300 euros and obviously not much happening. Because it's just too little to get some proper traction. You need to move with a certain level of volume, otherwise there's no point in running ads. We start with a small budget, but there has to be a certain level, right? And what we found is best for the start, which is still a super small budget, is around 50 euros a day, or like even 40 to 50, you know, you can start with that. That's the minimum, you have to have that. We start with a small budget because in the beginning, you know, the metrics are a bit random, like CPC, sometimes a bit too high. The campaign is still learning, so it behaves in a strange way sometimes. Sometimes you get a lot of clicks, cheap traffic, more expensive traffic. So the campaign is still trying to find your ideal target group, you know. And then once you get some purchases in, purchase 1, purchase 2, and you gather some data, then everything becomes a bit more smoother. You get more purchases, better ROAS, and then you can slowly increase your budget as well. Move it up plus 20% and scale, right? But that's why we start with a small budget. We give it some time, gather the data, so everything stabilizes. And once we have that, once we get some purchases, decent ROAS, at least break even, then we scale up pretty fast, because that's still a very little budget and you do need some volume. You do need a lot of clicks, a lot of purchase data to properly get out of the learning phase. Because how would you otherwise ever get to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10k days? You need a lot of data to eventually even get there. So that's the most important aspect. Start with a small budget, but not too little, not too high. Aim for 50 euros a day, okay? Second principle. Okay, we said we will scale after some time once we gather a little bit of data, right? But how do you scale properly? And a lot of people get that wrong as well. We will tackle all of that later too, when we talk about some of the typical beginner mistakes. Yeah, some people get too excited and suddenly they set the budget to 300 euro. Crazy. Because maybe they have money, maybe they are not afraid of spending money, which is great because that means you're not too emotional about it. But that's a big jump, right? In percentage-wise. And it messes up the algorithm. It's a little bit too quickly. Other people make the mistakes, they're like too conservative, especially in the beginning, and then they increase it by 5 euros. And yeah, you're not really getting anywhere like that. Be a bit more ballsy. And in the beginning, you can definitely make some bigger jumps, but down the line, you don't want to improve it more than 10 to 20%. And I will give you an example. Let's say we start with 50 and I see we are getting some proper traction really quickly, you know, like good conversion numbers, good ROAS already. We do have the budgets. We want to move a bit more aggressive in the end. Maybe I will set it directly to 80, which percentage-wise you see is quite a lot, right? That's way more than 10%. That's way more than 20%. But in relative numbers, it's not that much. It's like 30 euros more. We are still in the learning phase anyway, so we can move a bit quicker, you know, a bit more aggressive in the end. So that's all right. Let's say once I'm at 150 euros, so we always have we're getting some conversions every single day. That's too much, or even 250. In that case, I would probably make smaller steps and see, okay, 20% we can still easily do, you know, let's go to 180. Then next we go to 200, for example. And then, but steadily, we make sure everything grows. But we aim for a certain level of consistency, because if we are too aggressive with the budget changes, it will mess up with the algorithm a little bit. And you don't want to get too emotional about it, because what I see some beginners do as well, they basically move with the budget like that. It's going, and it basically goes hand in hand with what I taught you in the previous video. They get too emotional about good days, they get too emotional about bad days. And then they do things like that. They increase the budget. Oh, it was shitty today, then decrease it again. And oh, I had a good day, and they increase it again. And then it looks like that, when in fact it should look more like that. Okay, same budget, increase it, and you grow consistently. And okay, maybe it's a bit too high now. Maybe let's go back to that level and let's stick to that. Make some changes, improve some things, and then we can test again. Increase, scale. That's how it should look like. Not like that messy thing here. Talk about messy, like the whole thing also looks a bit, bit insane at this point. But yeah, you get the picture. All right, before we clean that, quick recap. We talked about which budget to start with, how to scale the budgets, decrease budgets, and now we will talk about how Google will spend your budget and how the campaign will behave in the beginning, especially looking at the budget. And what will happen in the beginning, sometimes you will notice that, and that also freaks some people out. Let's say that's the whole day, right? Yeah, let's try to make it a bit never be. All right, let's say that's the whole day, right? That's midnight again, 24 hours, okay? And what you will see sometimes in the beginning, Google will not spend your budget steadily, or what people would like to see is, okay, basically spends the whole day, Then in the beginning, it spends more because that's usually where you get the best return on investment. Let's make the chart a bit better than in the beginning and the evening, yeah. Something like that, That's how it usually looks like, or actually, yeah, pretty much like that. And again, in the evening, you get the best return on investment usually because that's where people are at home, right? They are not busy, they are not at work, they have time to sit down, properly shop and buy things. So that's where you usually get the best ROAS. So let's remove that. But what is Google doing sometimes, especially in the beginning phases? You have a small budget and the chart will look like that. Okay, nothing usually, and then in the morning it spends almost all your budget already, and that's pretty much it for the day. A couple of clicks here and there. Or even worse, it spends everything midnight already, and then it looks like that, right? And it's really frustrating because okay, I get the best ROAS here, Google. Like, why do you do that? But in the end, you have to roll with the bunches a little bit here. That's, by the way, is principle number 3. You have to roll with the bunches here a little bit and just take it, because the more data Google is gathering, the more clicks you get, the more purchases you get, the better the algorithm can learn. And the more it learns, the more confirmation it gets, the better the whole thing will look like, and it stabilizes with time. But at the beginning, you just take it and give it some time, and the more purchases you get, the better that will look, and the more stable it will look as well, and then the chart will more or less look like that. So trust the system a little bit. I know it's frustrating in the beginning, but it works, and that's why we said, okay, patience and consistency, one of the key principles. You don't want to stress too much too early on. You don't want to interfere with the system too much, because can interfere with the system, but we usually never do that. There are rare exceptions, of course, but we usually never do that because it will hurt you in the long run. All right, that's principle number 3, and hand in hand with that goes principle number 4, which I will show you here as well. What Google also likes to do, especially in the beginning phases, is spend way more than your daily budget, usually up to 2x your daily budget. So let's say you have a budget of 50 euros a day. You will see in the beginning an overspend of 80, for example, 100, 110, sometimes even for a couple of days in a row. And you think like, what the fuck, Chris? I have a daily budget of 50 euros. Why does it spend so much? And it goes hand in hand with that principle, because what Google tries to do here is gather as much data as possible, as quickly as possible, especially in the beginning phases when you're still in the learning phase. That's why it spends all your money so early on, right? That's why it spends double the budget, because you don't have a lot of data in the account yet. You don't have a big budget. So Google spends it quickly, tries to get some data really quickly. Again, once you have the data, it will stabilize. But you have to understand that it will spend more than your daily budget, and it can do that at all times, even with more established account. And it makes sense, because what Google does, okay, you give them a bit of freedom with your budget, and they spend more on the weekends, for example. But the algorithm knows after some time, okay, I can get a better ROAS on the weekend. They spend more on the weekend and less on a Monday or Tuesday, for example. So you would never see a flat cost chart. It will always go up a bit, down a bit, so it's very, very flexible, right? And as I just said, okay, sometimes it spends more, sometimes it spends even less. And that's important to understand, that a lot of people don't know that. Okay, Google can overspend, Google can spend less than your daily budget. But on a 30-day average, right? Over the whole month, on a 30-day average, Google will always spend the daily average of 50 euros a day. So 50 euros times 30, Google will never spend more than 1.5K in that 30-day period, right? So if you look at the whole month, maybe they spent a bit more in the beginning, 100, 110, whatever, then a bit less on some other days, but at the end of the month, it will be the average of 50 euros a day if you don't change your budget. So that's very important to understand as well, because a lot of beginners don't know that, and then they start to stress when they see, okay, Google overspent it massively, especially if the return is not that great yet in the beginning. But understand that's part of the process. Give the system some freedom. That's why we discussed in the first video, patience, consistency, let it run, gather some data in the first few days, first few weeks, and it will pay off in the long run. And that's how Google works. It takes some time. It's not as quickly as Facebook, but it's way more effective in the long run. And once you're there, it's very consistent and gives you results consistently. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So we have 4 key budget principles that you have to understand. That's it for now. See you in the next video.